That's fine, yeah. Whoa. We're adjourned. Thanks, Richard. We're still trying to figure out the new building. I'll go ahead and call this January 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening and wish you all a very happy and prosperous new year for 2018. With that said, I would like to ask Jen and Pam to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Thank you, Jen and Pam. I'm going to reshuffle the agenda slightly. We're going to move on to our consent agenda. Do any changes or additions to the December 4th, 2017 minutes, or can I have a motion for approval?
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
That motion has been seconded by Councilor Williams. Further discussion on the motion?
I have 3 corrections to the minutes.
Go ahead.
Page 48, about 4 paragraphs down where it starts with discussion following, and it says phase and the frontier road. I think that should be frontage road.
Okay.
And then on page 50, right above where it says Councilor Sweeney made a motion, some of the councilors should be plural rather than councilor. And then on page 51 at the very bottom, Leo Keane is K-E-A-N-E rather than K-E-E-N.
Is that all, Richard?
That's it.
Further discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda as amended? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does pass unanimously. We'll move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is the presentations of plaques to our departing city council members tonight, Jen Franson and Pam Barbaras. And for this portion of the meeting, I'm going to step down to the microphone, and then we'll move on to the oaths of office and the seating of our new judge as well as our incoming city councilors. I thought it only appropriate to address you and Pam from down here. So Jen and Pam, as you all know, were elected in the general election back in November 2013, and they served the city very well and with passion from January 2014 through today, January 2nd, 2018. If I get this list correct, I'm lucky, but I think Jen served on about 4 long-term standing boards during her tenure here with the city. She was the representative on the Montana West Economic Development Board, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee, a short stint on the Board of Adjustment, correct? Yes. Okay, and finally, Jen was instrumental in a lot of the workings and plannings that went into our city hall and parking structure, and served for numerous years on the city hall and parking structure steering committee. Pam served on the Whitefish Tree Advisory Committee, the Legacy Lands Advisory Committee, which is basically the liaison group between Whitefish Legacy Partners and the city of Whitefish. She served on the Board of Adjustment as well in a short capacity, and then on the Wisconsin Avenue Corridor Study Steering Committee. Have I missed any? Good. So much of the work when you're a sitting councilor goes on behind the scenes, and the commitment we have to sit up here is very significant. We're volunteers and we serve because we care about our community, and certainly Jen and Pam are no exception to that. So on behalf of the council, staff, and the community of Whitefish, I want to thank you for your service to the city. You have left a mark you can be very proud of, and now I'd like to present you both with your outgoing memorial plaque. Now I would like to move on to the oaths of office, and I'd like to invite Andy Fury to join me on the floor of the council chambers. Andy, if you don't mind joining me down on the floor here, we'll administer the oath of office. How ironic. Andy got me on council 12 years ago. Now I'm administering the oath to Andy. So as the world turns.
Just don't go too fast.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Andy Fury,
I, Andy Fury,
as a city councilor of the city of Whitefish,
as a city councilor of the city of Whitefish,
Montana, do
do
solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
solemnly swear I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the state of Montana,
Constitution of the state of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
and I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
Congratulations, Andy.
Thank you.
This is year 17, correct? This will fill out 20 years?
I'm in year 18 and a half.
18 and a half. I think it's a record.
Close to my 20.
Ryan, if you would please join me up here on the floor of the council. I'll go slowly. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Ryan Gregory Hennon,
I, Ryan Gregory Hennon,
as a city councilor of the city of Whitefish, Montana,
as a city councilor of the city of Whitefish, Montana,
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the state of Montana,
the Constitution of the state of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Ryan. You get to sit next to me, at least for this first meeting. And last but not least, certainly Your Honor, William Heilman, if you would join me up on the floor of the council, please. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, William Heilman Jr.,
I, William Heilman Jr.,
as municipal judge of the city of Whitefish, Montana,
as municipal judge of the city of Whitefish, Montana,
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the state of Montana,
the Constitution of the state of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
Congratulations, William. Welcome aboard as our new city judge. We will move on to item 6, which is communications from the public, and this is time set aside for the public to comment on items that are on the agenda, but not advertised as a public hearing or anything else you'd like to bring to the attention of the council. Proceed with that election now, okay? Do I have a motion?
I would
Frank?
move to appoint Richard Hildner as deputy mayor. And if I get a second, I'll be happy to speak to that.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Frank?
I think there are probably several of us that would like to do that job, and thought about it and given some consideration to it. I can say unequivocally, in my not so short but not so long tenure up here, I don't think we've had deputy mayor that has given what Richard has given the past 2 years, been available to you. Excuse me. Been available to the city, to John. His energy has been remarkable. And so I can see no reason that we would do any better, or I could do any better, or that Andy might be able to do any better, or Jen, or Katie, or Ryan. I feel very strongly about this, and I think Richard's done a great job, and I would like to see him do it some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, and I agree with all your comments and words this evening. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign. And that motion carries unanimously. As Michelle, thanks for keeping me on track. And just so the audience is aware, Melissa Hartman, our incoming city councilor, was unable to attend tonight, but she will be sworn in at the January 16th meeting, so there will be 7 of us in attendance at the next meeting. Now we'll turn to communications from the public. Are there any communications from the public tonight? Mary.
Good evening, Mary Flowers, Citizens for Barrett Flathead, 35 4th Street West in Kalispell. I want to bring to your attention my concern about the upcoming planning board agenda on January 18th. That agenda has 8 huge items on it. And I've raised this issue before the council before, and so I want to bring it back to your attention that the problem with public participation when you have an agenda that is so heavily stacked with large major items, even though you give legal notice in the required 15 days, the staff reports, which are critical to public participation, are not available within that 15-day requirement. Instead, at best, we'll be likely to see those on the 11th, late on a Thursday, with little time for public to prepare for the coming hearing and no opportunity to get comments in the planning board packet for them to have time to review before the meeting. That, I think, is a real issue with public participation, and I think it's critical that you look at that, look at your policies and procedures that govern your planning board practices, and also look similarly to, as you as a council have done, is to setting a limit to the time that you will meet on a given, or that the planning board would meet on a given evening. So I ask you again to bring those items back for consideration by this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Rebecca.
Rebecca Norton, 530 Scott Avenue. Welcome, Ryan. I've been researching how we clear snow along 93 South, and so this is what I found out. The city is responsible for clearing the sidewalks from 13th out to 40 on both sides of the road, but it can take up to a whole day to clear it, and our existing things that clear it are too wide to not destroy either grass or the sprinkler heads on some parts of it. So I think it's a huge safety issue when we get heavy snow loads, because so many people are walking out to the grocery stores. They end up walking in the street sometimes. So, in order to get one of the smaller things, I talked to one of the guys that was clearing the bike trail. It's about $25,000, but we don't have the manpower for it because we only have 4 guys doing it. So I was wondering if there's any slush money that we could, okay, so maybe it's a stupid question, but that we could actually think about contracting that out in the future, because I think it's a really a big deterrent to encouraging people to go out there to shop and to engage in the businesses out on the strip. And also, there's liability issues. If we're responsible for keep maintaining the sidewalks, we don't, and people are walking in the road against traffic at dark, because it's dark a lot this time of year. So I've just been watching it for about 3 years. This year, I decided to try to intervene and see what could be done. And so I think it would mean that the city council would have to charge someone to actually look at contracting that service versus our own personnel, which can't really keep up with it adequately. They do a great job, but I haven't seen it maintained consistently in some parts of it. So I just don't want anybody to get hurt, and I don't want to be post-holing through deep snow just to walk to the grocery store. So I think we could do better, since we do wonderful on Wisconsin, wonderful on 93 North. We just have a weakness in that area, and it is the entrance to Whitefish downtown, as well as all those businesses along there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Further public comment this evening? We'll stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any, we'll turn it to the council. Any volunteer board reports from the council? Richard.
Just that the Climate Action Plan Committee met this afternoon, but I was tied up in the work session, but they had a meeting, and the next Bike Ped meeting is the 8th, since we didn't have one on a Monday yesterday.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Further reports from the council? Not seeing any, we will move on to our public hearings. We have 3 scheduled tonight. We'll move to item 3A, which is consideration of an application from Bonsai Brewing Project for a conditional use permit to expand their microbrewery to add additional storage and cooking facilities in an adjacent building located at 635 Denver Avenue, and this is on page 67 of your packet. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So yeah, Bonsai Brewing Project received a conditional use permit a few years ago for their existing operations. They were able to purchase an adjacent lot to be able to expand their facilities, including their parking. Because they're expanding an existing conditional use permit, they are required to come back for a new conditional use permit. So they were able to purchase the 635 Denver property, and they're expanding some of their facilities into that building, including some office space, prep kitchen, and some long-term storage of their beer aging barrels. They're not changing their existing building, their serving area, or expanding their current operations, other than just moving some additional operations into the adjacent facility. And they're also adding an outside walk-in freezer at that location. And then they're expanding their parking lot to be 38 parking spaces. They meet the criteria of our conditional use permit. That particular use is compliant with our growth policy designation for neighborhood commercial. That zoning is B1, which does permit microbreweries as a conditional use in that zone. They're compliant with all of our zoning regulations, currently meet our parking standards and other regulations. They're not expanding their footprint of the existing buildings, and so there's not going to have to be required to go to architectural review or get any building permits unless they make any interior changes or some exterior modifications in the future. The site's suitable for the area. It's over 1.5 acres combined. There's plenty of open space on the site. Emergency access is not an issue. The fire marshal reviewed the plans and is okay with them. far as the site layout, we are requiring them to pave their entire parking lot to meet our city standards. All parking lots within the city must be paved to meet our air quality standards. They may have to do some additional landscaping, although they have quite a bit of existing landscaping on the site. There's no issues with traffic circulation. They'll continue to access it off Denver Street. They put, the original conditional use permit required a fence along Wisconsin that was put in and encloses their outside seating area. They're not proposing to change any of that. They have adequate existing landscaping. Their signage meets our code. So all those criteria are met. Public facilities aren't being expanded or changed. All those things are still in place and are being met. There's minimal neighborhood impact. About a while ago, they were able to lease some additional parking on the lot. When they first went in, I'm not sure they were anticipating the success they achieved, but we did have some issues and complaints at one time of people parking on Denver Street. They were able to get additional parking on their adjacent lot, which solved that issue. We haven't had any problems or complaints since they were able to add those additional parking spaces on site. They'll continue to operate 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. according to state law. It is compatible with the neighborhood. Staff recommended approval to the planning board with 8 conditions of approval. I'll just highlight the significant ones. Again, the parking lot shall be paved. No gravel parking is permitted. Any new impervious surface that exceeds 5,000 square feet must have an engineered stormwater plan submitted for review to our Public Works Department. Within 30 days of approval, they need to provide us with an updated parking lot design and landscaping plan that meets our requirements. And then the proposed paving and landscaping improvements need to be installed by September 1st, 2018, which gives them time to get that done during the summer months when the weather's compatible. Any future changes to the building, the new building must be approved by the building department and architectural review committee if appropriate. Did go to a public hearing at the Whitefish Planning Board. Planning Board reviewed it. We did have one public comment via email from Jim Stack supporting the project. No one spoke at the public hearing except for the applicant, and the Planning Board unanimously recommended approval, subject to the 8 conditions contained in the staff report, and staff continues to support the request. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave from the council? Any questions for staff? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be item 8A of our agenda. I do see the applicants in the audience. Graham and Keela, do you have anything else to add, or would you like to approach and address the council? Not required, only if you want to.
Hey, you know, yeah. I like microphones. So my only issue is the extensive paved parking scenario. You guys say that every parking lot must be paved in Whitefish, yet I can think of several unpaved parking lots. There's one right over here, the dog park. There's a church on Wisconsin. I have 3 of them across Denver Street from where I am. 38 spots is a huge paved surface that I don't necessarily believe in huge paved surfaces. I think our parking lot functions perfectly fine. It doesn't have dust issues. The neighbors don't seem to complain about it. We mow our noxious weeds, unlike some of the other neighbors. So I don't know, I just feel like it's a little extensive and expensive endeavor to pave so much space, other than, I know we do need it sometimes, but it functions perfectly the way it is currently, I feel. And we have invested a lot of money into the way that it is right now. So that's pretty much all I had to say. Everything else is spectacular.
Okay. Thanks, Graham. Appreciate your comments.
Yep, thanks.
Further public comment this evening from the audience? Further comment from the public? Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to council for a motion or discussion.
I'll move to approve WCUP 17-12 along with the findings of fact in the staff report and the 8 conditions of approval as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board.
Thank you, Richard. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion on the motion? I'll echo what Dave said. You guys have been a great addition to the north part of town, and I wish you the best of luck in your expansion, and it's a great business to have in our community, so keep up the good work. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. We will move on to item 8B of our agenda, which is going to be ordinance 18-2, our own ordinance, rezoning approximately 29.49 acres of land comprised of 31.5 parcels in the south half of Houston Drive right-of-way, located in Section 23, Township 31 North, Range 22 West, and Section 24, Township 31 North, Range 22 West in Flathead County, from County R1, which was their suburban residential district, to our own Whitefish WSR, which is our equivalent suburban residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone. And this will be on a first reading. Bailey.
Good evening. So as the mayor stated, the city is requesting a zone change on 31.5 parcels from County R1, which is their suburban residential, to WSR, which is our suburban residential district. The parcels are located along the south and west side of Houston Drive along Whitefish Lake, and the parcels are now located in the city limits. The purpose of rezoning the properties is due to the adoption of Resolution 1746, which annexed the parcels into the city limits on November 6th. Since they're now within the city, we have to rezone from a county zone to an equivalent city zone. On page 106 of your packet, I did include location of city zoning prior to the interlocal termination, which was in May of 2014. And as you can see, we're going back to the same thing that they were before, which was WSR. There's also, I did a comparison between the WSR and the County R1 on page 106 as well, just for your information. So the properties, as I said, they're located along the south and west side of Houston Drive. They total approximately 29.49 acres in size in total. They're a mixture of residential dwellings and some vacant lots. They are identified as suburban residential on our city-county growth policy future land use map, and the zoning districts that coordinate with the suburban residential are the WCR, WER, and the WSR. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 150 feet on December 1st. We also noticed advisory agencies and placed a legal in the paper, and I've had no comments received on this proposal at all. So just kind of the highlights of the request in accordance with our zoning regulations. I'll just try to hit the highlights. So as I said, the future land use map does designate these as suburban residential, and the proposed WSR is consistent with that designation. The properties are served by the City of Whitefish police and fire departments, and any future developments would be required to comply with city standards. Public services and utilities are available to some of the properties in the area. City sewer and city water are located partly along Houston Drive, and the majority of homes in the area are served by individual septic and well systems, or they may utilize domestic water lines to get their water from Whitefish Lake as well. The area is included in the city's extension of services plan, and services will be extended at some point when either future development occurs or existing systems may fail. The proposed zoning does include setbacks, maximum building heights, lot coverage, and all of those would be required to be in conformance with the building code at the time of a building permit submittal or a change in use. The property is located or served by Houston Drive, which is a paved city maintained road, and East Lakeshore Drive, which is a county maintained road. The character of the district is predominantly single-family residential. The lot sizes are comparable, and the proposed zoning is the most equivalent to the county R1. The WSR zoning permits only single-family dwellings, so that's not changing anything, any use between the counties and the city's equivalent, so only single-family residential. And as I stated, the WSR is compatible with our growth policy, and it would encourage the most appropriate use of land. So staff is recommending approval of the application. Let me flip to my transmittal page, sorry. So the planning board met on December 21st and considered the request. There was one member of the public that spoke at the public hearing requesting the rezone wait until a plan for water and sewer extension is proposed, and I did attach the draft minutes to your packet. Following the public hearing, the planning board recommended approval, voting unanimously to recommend approval to the city council, and I did include a proposed motion in my transmittal letter at all. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey from the council? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on what is item 8B of our agenda, which will be our own ordinance 18-2. Any public comment this evening on this item? Any public comments? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Andy?
I would move that we approve ordinance 18-02 on a first reading, approving WZC 17-22, adopting the findings of fact staff report as recommended to us by our Whitefish Planning Board on December 21, 2017.
I'll second.
And that motion has been seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle, we will stay with Bailey and move on to item 8C of our agenda, which is the north side of Houston Drive, ordinance 18-3, an ordinance rezoning approximately 13.31 acres of land comprised of 20.5 parcels, the Duff Lane right-of-way in the north half of Houston Drive right-of-way, located in Section 23, Township 31 North, Flathead County, Montana, from County R2, which was their one-family limited residential district, to our own Whitefish WER, which is our estate residential district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone.
Okay, so as the previous application, the city is requesting a zone change on 20.5 parcels from the county R2, which is their one family limited residential, to our WER, which is the estate residential district. They're located along the north and east side of Houston Drive and along Duff Lane. The parcels are also now located within the city limits, and this is due to the adoption of Resolution 1746, which annexed the properties on November 6th. So since it's going from a county zone to a city zone. So there's a comparison between the two zones on page 145 of my packet if you wanted to look at the differences between the city and the county zone. Again, we're going back to the same thing that they were prior to the interlocal termination. So the subject properties total approximately 13.31 acres in size combined. They're a mixture of residential dwelling units and vacant lots. The growth policy does identify this as suburban residential on our future land use map, which again does correspond to the WCR, WER, and the WSR. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 150 feet and noticed advisory agencies and placed a legal in the pilot, and I've had no comments received on this proposal as well. So just a quick overview again of the criteria. As I said, the future land use map does designate this as suburban residential, and the proposed change to WER is consistent with that designation. The properties are served by city police and fire. Any future development would be required to comply with city codes. As I said before, public services and utilities are available to some of the properties. Mostly in this area, it'd be the ones along Houston Drive is where the water and sewer is. The majority of homes, again, are served by individual septic and well systems and utilize domestic water lines through the Whitefish Lake. And again, this area is included on our city's extension of services plan, so at some point in the future, it will end up getting sewer and water. As I said before, the proposed zoning designation does include setbacks, maximum building heights, lot coverage. Any future construction would be required to conform to those standards. The character of the district is predominantly single-family residential. The lot sizes are comparable, and the proposed zoning would be the most equivalent. Again, the WER only permits single-family dwellings in that area. So planning staff did recommend approval of the rezone. The Whitefish Planning Board met on December 21st and considered the request. There were no members of the public that spoke on this item, and I did attach the draft minutes as part of your packet. Following the public hearing, the Planning Board did recommend approval of the rezone unanimously, and I did include a proposed motion as well. So happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on this item? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 8C of the agenda, which will be our own ordinance 18-3. Anyone wishing to provide testimony, please do so now. Not seeing any. I'll close the public hearing and turn it back to Andy for a motion.
May as well do it again, huh? I would move that we approve ordinance 18-03 on a first reading, approving WZC 17-23, adopting the findings of fact in the staff report as recommended to us by our Whitefish Planning Board on December 21, 2017.
I second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that again carries unanimously. Michelle. Which moves us pretty quickly on to item 9, communications from our city manager. You have Adam's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Adam? I would just like to give a big shout of appreciation and thank you to Christy Curtis, our exiting prosecuting attorney, assistant city attorney for the city of Whitefish. She was stellar by all accounts and will certainly be missed. And a big welcome to Mary Berry, I love pronouncing that, who was our new prosecuting attorney or assistant city attorney. So welcome to Mary Berry as well. Adam, any other items to report on?
Nothing else at this time.
Okay. We'll move on to item 9C, which is consideration of a proposal from Yoga Hive to lease the east half of the parking structure ground floor retail space. Adam, I assume you'll handle this. And just for the record, we do have Chap Godsey, the city's real estate advisor, present in the audience, as well as the applicants. Adam.
Yeah, it's great to see them here tonight. So we've been looking to rent that final space. I know we've had a number of interested parties come and look at the space. None have come so close as to actually submit an offer until Molly. And so we do have an offer from Molly to lease the space for her yoga studio. So included with your packet is all kinds of information that Molly has provided us on, a little bit about yoga, about their proposal that they're trying to do. I think the key points there are the $18 a square foot. That was the price that we have been kind of running with for quite some time. They're willing to pay that plus property taxes. The lease will run for 5 years. They'll have an option to renew for an additional 5-year term if they so choose. Molly is requesting a few things. She wants some sound minimization between the two units, and that's something we would end up doing anyway, as there's some pretty good sound that rolls over that metal ceiling that's in there. We do have a lot of insulation up there, but it's not all in the right places or doesn't provide an occlusion between one side and the other. So while it may absorb some, it doesn't prevent all the sound, and so it rolls over pretty good. So that's something we'd have to, take care of regardless of who that we rent it to. She'd also like to have us provide HVAC ductwork for a layout that she has, and then also applying the cost of polishing the floor, which is about $1,600 towards her flooring. She does not need the concrete floor polish. She needs to put in her own floor. So as such, we don't necessarily need to polish it. So that's something that I personally be willing to offer up there. The ductwork, on the other hand, that's typically a tenant cost, as we don't know the layout, the number of rooms, and all the different things that they're gonna need in their space. And so that typically rolls over to the tenant. So that's something that typically is a tenant cost, but nevertheless, she wanted to petition the council for that. So with that, I think you have the schedule and different things. I know we were looking for a retail component and things of that nature in this space. They do have that in the front. We're also looking for evening and weekend hours, and as you look on the schedule, they do accommodate for that. So I do believe that, on most accounts, that they met all of the requirements that we were kind of holding out for this space. So if you guys feel that there's a good fit here, then I'd recommend approval.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions for Adam? Frank.
Adam, maybe it's the lawyer in me that comes out, but what do you mean by cost of living increase? I've seen market rate, current market rate, I've seen other kinds of things in commercial leases. I've never seen cost of living used as a measure of anything for purposes of evaluating what the lease rate's gonna be.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Chap, but I think we typically use the Department of Commerce has a consumer price indexing portion of their website, and it calculates, whatever the CPI is, and then you would just calculate that over a 5-year period. So you can do that on that website, and it kicks out a number, and so you know what the percent increase would be on that.
And that's fine, Adam. When I have done leases in my practice, I've been more defined on how you calculate that rather than simply putting in a cost of living increase. I'd be more comfortable with a definition and a calculation or a way to calculate that so it's very clear to everybody. That's my only comment.
Okay.
Ryan? And then I'll get back to you, Chap.
Adam, I see your staff report said you would try to have a quote for the HVAC ductwork by the meeting time. Were you able to get one?
You know, I was able to get the same HVAC provider that we had in there to kind of throw out a rough estimate, and he came up with just over $9,000. He does want to walk the space, with the tenant to get a much more accurate number, but just based on what he could see on paper.
Katie?
In this contract, it said there are structural post-tension wire cables inside the ceiling and beams, and there can be no drilling into the ceiling on premise. I do know that you guys do aerial silks. Is that going to be an issue? How are you going to be able to support the silks? Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. I see some familiar faces. So we do...
Name and address for the record, sorry.
Molly Busby, 450 Haugen Heights Road, Whitefish, Montana. We do offer aerial yoga. We have a studio currently in Kalispell as well as in Columbia Falls. The Kalispell studio does have, like you've seen in Whitefish or in Kalispell, it's drilled it right into the beams. But Adam has communicated that with us about the ceiling. So in Columbia Falls, we have a full freestanding structure that is not connected to the building at all. It looks like it is, but it's not. And we would definitely work with, I don't even know what the options are. I haven't gone in there with an engineer yet, but definitely I'm aware of it. And at this point, I'm just interested in the space itself. So we would not be drilling into the ceiling at all.
Further questions for Molly while she's at the podium? I'm sure something might come up, so.
Yeah, no problem.
Frank.
Molly, I asked this question completely because I live in a small law office in a building where I had concerns about noise and everything else coming into my office and going out. How comfortable are you with we're going to be able to satisfy your need for soundproofing?
Yeah, it's a great question too. So I actually have a bit of experience with sound. My location in Columbia Falls, we just built out that space in February and realized after the fact that the brick wall that splits me and the gym next door that has group fitness classes, basically there were like holes in it you could see through and you could hear the words of the music. You could also hear the words of the instructor. And Yoga Hive, I don't believe was much of a deterrent on the gym, but we don't require total silence. I mean, there's going to be cars passing. I know that there are kids that go in that parking garage and scream, and you can hear that. I can hear that in my current space. But I do know that I have quite a bit of experience with it, and so I'm comfortable with some level of sound. But I think my biggest concern was just that with Cycle being a high-intensity cycling studio, I know what type of music they're going to be playing, and I don't want to get in a situation I was in last time where I had to deal with that. So I got a little bit smarter. I'm pretty confident that we can figure it out. I've talked with Adam quite a bit, and I feel like you guys understand that you would have to do this for anybody if it was a restaurant or a retail store. And I'm not dull to the fact that like complete silence might not be possible. I don't think that's possible in any space. And I've dealt with a lot of different neighbors, so I'm pretty confident that we can figure something out.
Further questions for Molly while she's up here? Do you have anything you'd like to add to Adam's staff report?
I think just the one thing is that my focus as a business, we've been around for 2.5 years, and our focus is bringing people together, both with movement and also with all the partnerships that I have with businesses in this community and with individuals and people. And I think it would be a really great synergy with the current tenant that's there. And I just think it would be a really great face to have in the city space. And I'm a really good tenant, and so I'd really be excited to work with you guys, and I'm confident that we can figure something out, so.
Thanks, Molly. I had one question, the HVAC system.
Yep.
So is that a deal breaker for you, or what's your position on that? I see, Adam, that it's currently included in the lease agreement, that it would be an owner improvement, correct?
Correct.
I offered the full asking price on the space. If I could have my choice, I would probably prefer the space that SomaCycle has. It's a corner space, it's got all windows, it's totally ideal for yoga. But we have this space available. But I offered the full asking price and a 5-year lease as opposed to potentially a 3-year lease, because I'm not gonna take ductwork with me if I leave. And I hope not to leave. And I don't think, for me, at $9,000, it's probably a deal breaker, to be honest. But I just don't know why. I feel like the ductwork that I would probably put in is probably applicable to what the next tenant would put in. And ideally, like, I know everybody might say this, but I'm in this for the long haul. I have 3 studios in the Valley, so I'm a pretty sure bet. And I don't intend to stop there. So I would really like you guys to cover the HVAC.
Thanks, Molly. Chap, I know you had your hand up earlier. Did you have anything to add to the discussion? Thanks, Molly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just your name and address for the record, please.
Chap Godsey, Remax Whitefish, 509 East 6th Street. Frank, in regards to your questions about the CPI, it's pretty well defined in lines 183 through 194 in the contract. So I didn't know if you'd seen that and if that was sufficient.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
The cost of living increase definition is pretty well defined in lines 183 through 195, 94 in the contract. And so I just wanted to know if that was sufficient.
If I'm reading this correctly, it says the initial monthly rent called for in the commercial lease multiplied by the CPI for the most current month before the adjustment is to take effect. So the CPI for the month before, on what base? On their base year?
On the initial month's rent. So it'd be the increase.
CPI for the most current month before the adjustment is to take effect.
Before the second 5-year term.
Right. So, query, does that mean that if the CPI for the month of January in 2023, when this comes up for renewal, happens to be 1% for the year from the year before, we multiply by 1% as opposed to what's the CPI cumulatively since the first day?
It would be the difference of what the CPI is on the first day versus before the second term, so not from the year prior.
So it'd be cumulative.
5 years prior.
Okay. I'd look at that language a little bit more in my view to make sure that's what it says.
Okay.
Because the way I read it, I could take that either way. And Angie probably has a better handle on it maybe.
Sure.
But that's what I would do, is make it very clear, because it's not clear in my mind.
Okay.
That's what it meant.
All right.
Okay.
Angie, do you have any comment on that language, or?
I don't, but I can look at it without them.
Okay. Katie?
I have a question for Adam. Regarding the HVAC system, did Sobacycle pay for their HVAC system, or was that our expense?
That's their expense. We don't have all the costs back yet. We just barely wrapped things up. So there'll be a final thing, because we worked together on several things in there. So I don't have the actual cost of what theirs is at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Richard?
If that were a restaurant, were we going to do something about the range hood for a restaurant?
You know, I'll go back to when we were looking at it for the original restaurant that was looked at there, Pig and Olive. And one of the things that we had looked at was possibly contributing to the hood portion on condition that it get left behind when they leave. And yes, ductwork does get left behind. It's an improvement that doesn't get taken with. But of course, the next tenant may come in, rearrange all the rooms, they got to tear out all the ductwork and re-put it all in anyway, unless someone comes in and utilizes it exactly as it's laid out.
Frank?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to the effect that I would be happy to approve this lease with the idea that Adam continue to negotiate with the tenant on the viability of their taking on the responsibility for the HVAC or the ducting system that they might want, and how that might be managed, or if there's a basis for us to cost share under the circumstances. And as well as, at least for my purposes, I would like to see the lease more, a little clearer in my mind on how we're going to raise the rent at the end of the term for the renewal. But I would move forward with this on the basis that they continue to negotiate and get this thing done.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Do you see any issues with that motion, Adam? Does it give you what you need to move this forward?
Yeah, I think so.
So the two items are the language regarding, the cost of living adjustment, as well as whether or not we can negotiate a cost share, on the HVAC system, which I think would be a very reasonable, compromise to work with the tenants, considering they're committed to a 5-year lease with the option to extend an additional 5 years. So I think we can hopefully extend an olive branch on that portion of the project, would be my opinion. Richard?
Will that have to come back to council, that negotiation? Is there a need to bring that back to council, do you think?
Not if you approve me wrapping this up.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Further questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Michelle? Thanks, Molly. Thanks for coming tonight. Great proposal, by the way. Yeah. We'll move on to item 9D, which is our review and consideration of the annual impact fee report. Dana?
Thanks. Good evening, Mayor Mulfeld and City Councilors. It's time for your annual report on impact fees as required by City Code and state law as well. We'll get into where those requirements come in a little bit. I'll just briefly go through the staff report that I've prepared for you. Impact fee cash balance overall has increased from FY16, and this, I should say, is for as of June 30th, 2017, so for fiscal year 17. But we have seen an increase in overall impact fee cash balance. Some, however, specific impact fees have seen a decrease, some have seen an increase. Any of the decreases is due to increased spending for those impact fees. Just as a point of reference, impact fees, obviously cash reserves, we talk a lot about that during budget season, which is our general cash reserves. Those are very important to weather economic downturns, planning for capital projects, et cetera. But cash reserves in impact fees is a little bit different. Because you're collecting impact fees for the impact that the property has on our systems or buildings and facilities, you do expect that you should spend those within a reasonable amount of time. 5 years is a general, time period that has been thrown around there, or shortly thereafter. If you are to accumulate impact fees further than that, you really want to have a good capital improvement program to support that. You'll see I also attached our water and wastewater capital improvement program pages, because in FY16 I did have some current concerns, as did the committee, about the cash reserves for water. However, since that, the council did appropriate $965,000 in FY18 to make sure that we are looking forward and using the cash that is collected. Impact fee revenue. We did exceed budget expectations, but if you do look at the graphs for just general impact fees and then our water and wastewater ones that are specifically tracked in a different fund, we did see a decrease from FY16. That was expected. FY16 was a very significant building year. We had some major commercial projects come through, City Hall, 2 hotels, and then a large residential development. So while it does look like we had a decrease, we're actually more in line with FY14, 15, and moving forward, we're seeing really good impact fees again moving forward for FY18, tracking higher than we would have in FY17. For expenditures that I'm also required to go through with you, we've used our impact fees on various projects. Obviously, we've spent money on trails, 2 stairways, and then some other trail-related projects. Our park maintenance building impact fees, emergency services center impact fees are both transferred to the tax increment fund to repay the debt, or repay the fund who paid to build those facilities, debt, or I should say cash funded. And then the City Hall impact fees actually went to the City Hall construction fund to help pay for the new City Hall and parking structure. But I should say City Hall. And then stormwater, there weren't any projects in FY17, but we are accumulating those for future projects. State Park Road will have a significant stormwater portion to it that could be used as partial funding. Water and wastewater, again, we had little use for water, but FY18, we did see significant increases in the budget. Specifically, the water tower south of 40, is that what I say? Okay, it's in here. And then the big thing that we're facing with our impact fees is the 5-year review. So according to state law, we are required to review and update our impact fees, and not just the fees, but the studies that set the impact fees every 5 years. That was increased from every 2 years to every 5 years, so luckily the state allowed us to go a little bit longer. As you know, the committee, we did put out an RFQ for that, and then on December 15th, we actually interviewed 3 different firms, and I'll get into in my next staff report about the recommendation for the consultant selection for that project. So staff respectfully requests that the City Council review and accept the annual report on impact fees.
Thanks very much, Dana. Any questions for Dana, or can I have a motion to review and accept the annual impact fee reports?
I'll move to accept the annual review and report?
Annual report.
And annual report on impact fees.
Great. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous. Michelle, which brings us on to a related topic, 9E, consideration to select FCS Group as the consultant and provide the city manager authorization to negotiate a contract up to $44,000 of a budget for the impact fee study. Dana.
Thank you. Okay, so to piggyback off of my annual impact fee report, in 2007, the city adopted and imposed the 7 impact fees that we currently have. Since then, we have not changed those rates. And as I'd mentioned, state law requires that we review and update our impact fee studies every 5 years. In 2012, the review and written analysis was done in-house. However, with the review being due in 2017 and the projected limited staff availability, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee recommended last fall that the City Council provide budget authority to hire a consultant to complete that review. And during the budget process, the City Council did appropriate $44,000 for the study to be updated. As I'd mentioned, we had the city provided notice of the review and update through a request for qualifications, and it was published on 3 separate dates. And we received 3 submittals of qualifications. The 3 firms included FCS Group, AE2S, and Tischler Bice. The Impact Fee Advisory Committee, we interviewed all 3 consulting firms on December 15th, 2017, and we were able to discuss the interviews at that point as well as their submittals. And the committee unanimously approved recommending that the City Council select FCS Group as the consultant for the impact fee review and update. While we had hoped that we would have a negotiated contract to bring tonight, unfortunately with the holidays hitting right away, basically after we had gone through the interviews, we did not have the completed contract for this meeting. However, so that we could continue the process of working with FCS Group, we wanted to at least bring this to council, having you know what our recommendation will be for the firm, and then giving Adam the authority to move forward with the contract negotiations. The committee has set for the consultants a strong date of June 30th, 2018. We want this done this fiscal year, and they are willing and capable of providing that date. So the budget provides for $44,000 for the full project. FCS Group did indicate that that was an okay dollar amount during the interviews. We did hear from other consultants that it could be significantly higher. I think it just depends on at what level the review is done. FCS Group proposed to us what we were wanting to see. So I don't think we'll have a problem meeting the budget. So staff respectfully recommends that the City Council select FCS Group as the consulting firm for the impact fees review and update, and authorize the city manager to proceed with contract negotiations, including an amount that is both fair, reasonable, and within the appropriated budget of $44,000.
Thanks, Dana. Any questions for Dana on her report? Motion? Not everyone jump at once. Andy?
I couldn't get my microphone turned on, sorry about that. I would move that we direct staff to negotiate and finish contract with FCS Group to complete the impact fee study in an amount not to exceed $44,000.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Michelle. Thanks, Dana. And we'll move on to item 10, communications from the mayor and city councilors. Any comments on the letter that we received? Item 10A of the agenda. Andy?
I just had one comment in there, that they were wanting us to condition 95 Caro's approval with something on the property next to it, the Peace Park, which I just want to let them know that's not something within our legal jurisdiction to do, and it's not even in the city, for one thing, and two, it's an entirely separate property and not part of the PUD, and that's not something that we're able to do, and I apologize for that, and I understand that they don't like it, but that's not something we can do, so my only comment.
Thanks, Andy. We'll move on to our appointments of city council members to various boards, commissions, and committees. We have 14 committees to make appointments to. Just for the council's FYI, item 13, so it would actually be B13, which is the Wisconsin Corridor Study Planning Committee. I believe that committee's disbanding, and we do not need to appoint to that, so we'll strike that from the agenda this evening. And we can move on to the first item, which is the Park Board. The mayor's designee, Frank Sweeney, is currently serving in that capacity with Richard as an alternate. Is anyone, you guys still willing to continue serving?
I would encourage someone else to be the alternate on that committee, just to give them some exposure to the park board.
Be happy to continue at the pleasure of the council.
But if there is no one, it's not terribly onerous. to be
Anyone
the
else
alternate.
interested in serving as an alternate? Yeah, Ryan, okay. So we'll need a motion to that effect?
Yeah, you're just
Don't
getting
overload.
warmed up.
It's what can happen. Okay, that will then we'll retain Frank as our current designee, and Ryan can serve as the alternate designee. I did receive an email from Melissa today, and her interests lie with the Climate Action Committee, the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, the LLAC, which is the Legacy Lands Advisory Committee, and then the Bike PED Committee, just for your consideration as we go through the list. We'll move.
What was the second one that Melissa was, the CAP?
The Whitefish Strategic Housing Steering Committee that we interviewed for earlier. There's two counselor appointments to that committee.
Thanks.
Sure. We'll move on to the Resort Tax Monitoring Committee. Andy's the current designee. Yep. Need a motion to that effect, please.
So moved.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Actually, I need a second for that.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Heldner. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle?
Mr. Mayor, can I interject here? In my own initiative, I talked with our city.
Microphone.
Excuse me. I talked with our city attorney, and after I'd spoken with you about the idea that we've had very good success having an alternate, particularly on the planning board and on the park board, for those not fairly rare occasions when the designated counselor can't be in attendance for a scheduled meeting. It's worked out pretty well so that we maintain our presence on those boards when conflicts of timing come in. I would personally recommend or think it would be a good idea for us, maybe the Resort Tax Committee is not one, but I think there are probably several others that we would be well served to have as an alternate, or to appoint an alternate for the occasion when the designated counselor can't attend or can't be at that particular meeting. Angie's discussion, our discussion was more along the lines of, as long as we're not increasing the number of counselors on a particular board, doesn't mean we can't have an alternate for the one that's appointed.
Do you feel we need an alternate for all boards?
Not all, but I mean, just because they don't meet as often. I mean, for example, the park board and the
Sure.
planning board meet at least monthly, and sometimes more often. There are probably others, and I haven't gone through here, but we ought to think about that as we go through this list.
Okay. So we'll move on to Montana West Economic Development Board. This was held by Jen Franson, and Andy's currently the alternate. I believe most of these meetings, if not all, are held down in Kalispell, correct? Was anyone dying to serve on the MWED board? It is a commitment of the boards. How often do they meet? Is staff aware? Be a good question for Jen, but I wouldn't guess it's probably more than 3 or 4 times a year. Is that? Yeah.
It says quarterly.
Quarterly?
Packet, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I could go ahead and move up to that spot, and as long as we have an alternate, because we will need one, because I probably will get caught traveling and not be able to make all of the meetings, so. Jen did a great job and got to every one of them, so it was, as the alternate, when I was doing it, it was easy.
Okay. Katie just volunteered to be the alternate. So we'll need a motion to appoint Andy as the designee and Katie as an alternate.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle? We'll move on to the Pedestrian and Bicycle Path Advisory Committee. It's currently Richard Hildner, who does a stellar job on this committee. In particular, your reports back to the council.
I enjoy being on that committee. I'm I would give it up if somebody wanted to twist my arm or arm wrestle, but otherwise I'd like to stay on.
Okay.
I would move to appoint Richard to the Bike Ped Committee.
I second.
Seconded by Counselor Williams to reappoint Richard to the Bike Ped Committee. Further discussion, all those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Michelle?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, would this be, could I ask a question of Richard? Do you think we need an alternate?
I don't think so in this case, because we have city staff that also comes to that meeting, and I think we're well-served, and it's rare that I wouldn't be there for one of those.
Whitefish Tree Advisory Committee was previously held by Pam. Anyone willing to volunteer on the Tree Advisory Committee?
That wasn't on Melissa's list.
But I think she'd be up for it.
But I think, but she's not, no, I refuse to do that. But I think it may, yeah, I know. But I think it is one
I
that,
think it would be great.
that she might be interested in.
Okay. Motion to that effect, please.
I'll move to appoint Melissa Hartman to the Whitefish Tree Advisory Committee.
I second.
I guess subject to her coming back to us and say, I can't do it.
Sure, sure. Was there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, and that's unanimous as well, Michelle. Impact Fee Advisory Committee, which was held previously by Jen Franson. How often do they meet, Dana?
We generally meet annually, but with the impact fee study going on right now, I think it'll be, a couple more times this year. So, from now till June 30th, it might be a few more times, but generally it's once a year.
Okay. Ryan? Yep. Okay. Ryan's volunteered for the Impact Fee Advisory Committee. Can I have a motion to that effect, please?
I move to appoint Ryan Hennon to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? And that's unanimous as well, Michelle. The 911 Administrative Board, which is currently held by Chief Dial as well as Katie Williams, who's been doing a fantastic job. Katie?
If the chief would like, I'd like to appoint Chief Dial, and then I would be okay with being his alternate as well, as we're still working on the funding solutions, which is going well.
Okay. So Chief Dial would be the designee, and Katie would be the alternate, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He does a great job.
I would move to appoint Chief Dial as the principal and Katie is the alternate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hildner. All those in favor? Show your hands, and that's unanimous as well. Michelle, always an exciting one, the Insurance Committee. 2 city councilors as ex officio, meaning non-voting members, and Frank and Andy currently hold those positions.
I'll stay. Yeah. I can
Stay? Okay.
And increase their pay, double it.
Real estate advisors, currently myself and Andy. I'd clearly like to stay on. I think I have to. Andy, you go.
I move to appoint the mayor and Andy Fury.
I second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle, which brings us on to the Legacy Lands Advisory Committee, which was presently was Katie as well as Pam. I do know this is one that Melissa would really like to be, part of, based on what we discussed a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'll move to include Melissa Hartman.
And Katie for another term?
And Katie, you?
Yeah.
Oh, you were bowing your head like, oh,
sorry.
don't look at me.
Yeah, sorry. Unless Andy wants to do it, though. Just State of the Union. I don't know. I'll do it, but if you want to, too, I'd be more than happy to bow out.
I mean, I potentially bring some history that may be of value to that committee. I know I talked with Maria a little bit about it, and, I mean, I could be an alternate, or, I mean.
We
but
need
I-
to.
You do need to, and you do need to be present. That's,
So we do need to?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to do it, but I know, Katie, you've got time invested in it and have done a great job, so it's up to you.
can we appoint Andy as an alternate as well? Would that
I
be-
think we need 2 counselors, isn't that correct, Maria? Not an alternate, it has to be 2.
Could we, but
members
could
in
we have,
attendance.
well, I guess we can't with the makeup of the.
It does say mayor and 1 or 2 counselors, but I would agree that you could have an alternate if one of the counselors was not able to make one of the meetings. It would be helpful to have both there, because if there's anything that needs to be voted on, it is a 2-to-2 vote, 2
I agree.
from the Legacy Partner Board and 2 from the city, so.
And I do not want to serve on the LLAC, I'm already a regular board member, so.
Well, that kind of tears it then, doesn't it, to have Melissa, Katie, and Andy?
Well, that would be 3. And we don't need
Oh,
3, we need 2.
Yeah.
Mayor or 2 counselors.
Oh, gotcha,
Yeah,
sorry.
So,
We could put the third in as an alternate though, just to ensure, because we did have issues in the past of not having 2 counselors present, and it needs to be 2. And just with, as the trail is growing, it'll be important too that you have 2 counselors, even if there's side meetings being held, as issues may arise.
Okay, my motion is for Melissa on that board and Katie with Andy as the alternate.
is there a second to that motion?
Okay with that?
Good. Motion has been seconded by Counselor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle, Katie, and Melissa, and Andy as the alternate. Whitefish Planning Board. Currently held by Richard Hildner, and Frank's been serving as the alternate.
I'm happy to stay on that board.
And I'm happy
I
to stay.
find it fairly interesting.
Okay.
I'm happy to stay as an alternate, but if anybody else is interested, I'm happy to give that up, but
It takes time.
I move to appoint Richard Hildner to the Whitefish Planning Board with Frank Sweeney as his alternate.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Michelle, which brings us on to the BOA, Board of Adjustment. I imagine we still need to fill these temporary vacancy positions, or have we resolved the attendance issues?
I don't think we still have a full board yet, but. So it'd be good to have some alternates just in case.
Okay. And those were both positions held by Jen and Pam. Is anyone interested in volunteering for the Board of Adjustment? How often does it meet, Dave?
About twice a year usually.
Okay.
And the only bit that we couldn't get a full board because we'd need a quorum, so.
Okay, do you think we need more than just one counselor? Ryan just volunteered.
I mean, one's probably fine, as long as there's somebody available to try to fill in.
Okay, anyone else interested in serving as a fill-in?
I'd be happy to, if
Okay.
needed.
Okay,
Happy?
I'll need a motion to that effect, appointing Ryan and Frank as temporary members to fill vacancies.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Williams. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and we'll appoint Ryan and Frank to the Board of Adjustment. Whitefish Climate Action Committee. Richard, apparently this is my appointment. He's done a stellar job. I'd like to appoint. It's not going to really last that much longer anyway, is it? Or are we going to have a standing committee, in your opinion?
Oh, I think eventually we may have one, but this committee should end its work and come back with a recommendation to council, probably for a standing committee, but then we'll have to reorganize that. So we have probably 3 months' worth of work to do.
Okay, with that said, I'll motion to reappoint Richard Hildner to the Whitefish Climate Action Plan Committee.
And I'll second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous as well. Michelle, which brings us on to our last item, which is the Whitefish Strategic Housing Steering Committee. I'm going to go ahead and postpone my appointments until the next meeting. I would like to have Addie, sorry. Yeah, I would like to bring Addie in for an interview since she was unable to attend, and I'll hold off on the council appointments as well, but just so you guys are aware, obviously the city staff appointments will be Adam and Wendy, to comprise that 9-person committee, but we'll go ahead and include that on our agenda on January 16th, and I'll make those appointments, which would require ratification by the council. And by so doing, I'm not holding up anything, Adam, am I? By not making those appointments this evening?
No, I mean, just puts it off a couple weeks. I don't think that's that big of a deal.
Okay.
They're gonna get after it right away anyway.
Were we planning to meet in the next 2 weeks?
If we filled it, I was gonna push to get a meeting right away,
Okay,
but I don't think a couple weeks is gonna kill anything.
okay, thanks. With that said, we'll move on to, do you need me to go back through that list, Michelle? I did copy it all down.
What about the 2 counselors for the steering committee?
I'm
For
going to
this-
do those at the next
You're going to do
meeting.
those? Okay,
Yep.
so all of those is next.
I'm going to postpone all 9 appointments.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Would you like me to go back through this list, or are you pretty confident you got that all? It's a lot of information to take
As
in.
long as Jake has the video and the audio,
Okay.
it should be okay.
Jake?
Thanks, Jake.
Have another done.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Michelle. We'll move on to mayor and city comments, unless there's anything else from staff. Adam?
I just wanted to point out a typo in my manager's report that I just noticed. The next meeting will be January 16th, not the 15th. as I put
Tuesday.
there.
And we'll move on to councilor comments. Who'd like to start tonight?
I'll start. if you
Richard?
want.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, is there any way, this keeps, Mary Flowers was correct, this does keep coming up, to get those staff reports out a little sooner, particularly, I looked at the agenda for the next planning board, it is jam-packed, it's going to be intense, and it's a lot of information for those wishing to comment, and organizations like Citizens who will have comments on lots of these, as opposed to individual projects. Is there any way to get that a little
I
sooner?
mean, with the planning board, we get the staff reports out a full week before the meeting. I mean, that's typical. It's, what state law requires. I mean, and, we're all busy staff people trying to put our reports together. So it just, puts other things off when we have to do that. If you guys, council as a whole directed us to try to get them out a few days earlier, we could try to do that. But we do get the whole packet out a week before the meeting, which is a little more than you guys get as a city council before your meeting, so.
Okay. I think that's something for consideration.
Frank?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but as long as we're on the subject. David, I hear Mary's comments and her concerns, and having been on the planning board and having sat up here for the number of years. When we do create 8 huge projects in one meeting, it causes all kinds of confusion and opportunity to not get things done. Are these projects that have to go on that meeting, or do we want to reschedule them to spread out the intensity of what that meeting's going to be?
Well, the majority of the things on the agenda are things that, people have an expectation, they put their application in, they paid their fee. The one item on there that isn't part of that is the Wisconsin Avenue Plan. We could postpone that a month. I mean, the planning board only meets once a month, so then that puts it off another month. And the planning board could choose, that'll probably be the last item on the agenda, they could choose to postpone it and not, if it gets so late, they don't want to deal with it, then they can postpone it the next month, but we did advertise for that item on the agenda, and, if it gets delayed, it's not the end of the world, so.
I think we're dealing with what we have to deal with next meeting, but I think on a prospective basis, it would seem to me we'd want to take a little finer cut at what we're assigning and what projects we're assigning on that kind of a board, just to make sure that everybody gets a due opportunity to review it and really understand it.
Yeah, it's probably once or twice a year where we get a big agenda like that, and, it hasn't always been like that. There's some agendas have been really quick. There's times the last couple of years where the planning board didn't even meet because there wasn't anything on there, so just sometimes when it rains, it pours,
The other is, I know it's way too late this snow season, but to maybe take another look at Rebecca Norton's comments on contracting for snow plowing on both sides of Highway 93 from 13th to Highway 40 on the path there, both sides. And I think it's just something to take a look at and see if we can put that as a contract item, which would free up our Parks and Rec folks. It may work, and again, it may not, but just take a look at that. I think would be worthwhile. And finally, Ryan, welcome to Whitefish City Council.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Andy?
Nothing else.
Not too much, Craig. Be sure and thank everybody in Public Works. It was a tough couple of weeks, I know, especially to have it all happen during the holidays. And I heard very few complaints from people, although a couple of times people were whining, but that happens. It was a big snow event, and I thought everybody did a great job. I know the parking structure is problematic, so I think we need to be thinking about that for next year. Obviously, this year we're not going to do, but if we look at the cost of running the burner and everything else, and a roof might not be a bad idea long-term. I don't know where the money comes from, but we may want to start thinking about that. Other than that, welcome, Ryan. I can tell you're new because you had a big audience out there for you for your swearing in. You've done as many years as I, nobody shows up. It's like, well, he's done it, whatever. So anyway, but welcome. Hopefully it's one of the most enjoyable things you ever do in your life. So there you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Ryan?
I'm excited to be here. Other than that, I'm looking forward to learning a lot.
Well, welcome. Katie?
Welcome, Ryan, and I hope everyone had a great new year, and here's to 2018.
Thanks, Katie. Frank?
No comments, thank you.
Okay.
Good for the new year.
Katie brought to my attention that we didn't make the appointment to the Whitefish Trail Ops Board. We probably need to do that. And I guess question for Angie, can we go ahead and do that tonight since it didn't appear on the agenda, or will we have to get that on the next agenda for action?
I'd get it on the next agenda.
Okay, so I'll let you and Maria figure that out. Okay. Thanks for that. Big year ahead. I look at our goals list and everything we have set out to accomplish. Reminds me that we should probably get a council retreat, scheduled once Ryan and Melissa get up to speed. So I'm going to suggest probably, March, April, time frame. I've discussed this idea with Adam, and he'd like to attend at least a portion of the meeting. So just have that kind of in the back of your mind as we move through the next couple months. With that said, I think we also as a council need to start thinking about our TIF priorities. We're getting down to the wire here on 2020 when the TIF expires, and we've got some finite dollars available to really maximize economic development within our town. So I've talked with Adam about, trying to brainstorm, how we best, maximize those funds to really have the impact we need within our town. And then, of course, I know it sounds a ways off, but our resort tax reauthorization, and there's a lot of ideas about how that should be reapportioned when we do go back to the voters for a vote. And of course, that's not going to happen in the next 1 or 2 years, but probably in the next 4 or 5. I think it would be prudent to get that out in front of the voters well in advance of 2025. So just some discussion points I think we should be having as we move into the new year. And I'd like to give a big shout out to staff for all your work this past year. You guys are stellar individuals and as well as a collective, and you've done a remarkable job, Adam, and all of the directors on keeping our city on track in such a desirable place to live, work, and raise families, as well as my fellow city councilors. Honored to serve with you for 2 more years, and I look forward to 2018. On that note, we are adjourned.